This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories. China's top diplomat Wang Yi is in Italy, his second Europe trip in 2 months, aiming to recalibrate Beijing's ties with the EU and protect trade links as tensions rise over tariffs and Chinese investment scrutiny. South Korea, meantime, warns that the EU's plan to double steel tariffs and cut import quotas could hit its exports hard as Seoul's top trade envoy heads to Brussels, hoping to secure a better deal. Now, a Pentagon official says the U.S.-South Korea alliance should focus on deterring North Korea, but adds its advanced defenses also boost deterrence against China. The Trump administration expected to roll out up to $15 billion in aid for U.S. soybean farmers after China, once their biggest buyer, halted purchases amid trade tensions. And in a surprise move, Britain's top prosecutor says that the case against these two UK nationals accused of spying for China was dropped because the government did not classify Beijing as a security threat. Also on the bulletin, gold punches through $4,000 an ounce, driven by growing fears over America's ballooning debt, stubborn inflation, and doubts about the US dollar's global dominance. Plus, North Korea on a diplomatic blitz, welcoming its allies to Pyongyang ahead of the ruling party's founding anniversary on Friday. Now, the top Chinese diplomat is in Europe, his second trip to the continent in as many months. China's foreign minister Wang Yi has met with his Italian counterpart, Antonio Tajani, in Rome, and they will be delivering joint statements this hour. The visit comes at a crucial time for China's relations with the European Union. The bloc is set to double its tariffs on steel in a bid to protect itself from Chinese competition and to bring the Trump administration to the negotiating table. The proposed changes would bring new levies on steel to 50%, in line with U.S. levels. But that only applies to those importing above the quota, which also has been halved to preserve its domestic industry. Our Ross Cullen is covering the story for CNA from Paris, and we are going to pick his brain on this now. So, Ross, first up, what do we know about today's meeting, and what can we expect from the joint statements later?
Yeah, hi, Telly. This is a meeting of the China-Italy Government Committee, the 12th such meeting that will be taking place today. It's a 2-day visit for Wang Yi to Italy on the 8th and 9th of October, and then he'll be visiting Switzerland after that on the 10th of October. We do know that Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, she was in Italy. She was in China earlier this summer for her first full visit to China since she took office in 2022. So it's showing you the narrowing ties between China and Italy. They are trying to work together, particularly in the automotive sector. That's despite Italy voting in favour of imposing tariffs at the EU level on Chinese-made electric vehicles in 2024. So outside the EU's overall agenda, we do see Italy and China trying to work more closely together.
Also, help us understand the importance of China to the EU, and why is it so difficult for Brussels to balance its ties with Beijing?
Well, it's an interesting relationship, I tell you. If we break it down, the EU sees China as a partner and a competitor and a rival at different levels. Of course, it wants to see a level playing field and fair chances to invest in each other's markets. China is a huge part of the EU's economy, the third largest trading partner in goods and services after the United States and the United Kingdom, the second largest if you just look at goods alone. However, the EU does feel that that relationship is systemically imbalanced. There is a growing trade deficit and asymmetric policies it believes being used by China to support its own industries, and so the EU wants to try to be able to use that level playing field. So that's why it has been clamping down on things such as Chinese-made electric vehicles. However, after this deal that we've seen signed between Brussels and Washington, there is hope that perhaps there is a chance to work together when it comes to things like global tensions and the upheaval that we've seen on the world economy, often related to or being able to be tracked back to the Trump administration's tariffs that it did announce earlier this year. Brussels and Beijing do want fair competition between both sides, and so that is something that they will be looking for, both at a wider level and also when they get the chance to have face-to-face meetings, as we are seeing today in Italy. Ateli?
Ross Cullen for CNA from Paris. Thanks for that report. Meantime, Seoul warned that Brussels' proposed tariff hike on steel could significantly impact exports to the bloc. The European Union is South Korea's second-largest export market for steel, having sold 3.8 million tons of that metal to the bloc from July 2024 to June this year. Nearly 70% were exported under a duty-free quota, while the rest was shipped under the global quota, also without tariffs. Well, the planned hike would present another blow to the industry that has already suffered 5 straight months of losses following the imposition of the Trump administration's 50% levy on steel. But South Korea's industry ministry says it's hoping to secure its interests by getting preferential allotment through a free trade agreement it has with the EU. The ministry adds that the country's top trade envoy, Yohan Koo, is planning to meet his EU counterpart in the coming days to present South Korea's stance. Now, a senior U.S. official says that South Korea's defense capabilities could add to the United States' deterrence against China. Pentagon nominee for Indo-Pacific Affairs, John No, said that the alliance between U.S. and South Korea should focus mainly on deterrence against North Korea. But he says many capabilities, such as long-range fires and integrated air and missile defense, could also work against China. Now, Mr. No is a Korean-American official tapped by President Donald Trump to be the next Assistant Secretary for Indo-Pacific Security. And he also told a Senate committee he believes America's defense and security priorities in the Indo-Pacific should be focused on China, calling Beijing Washington's most serious military threat. Mr. No's comments come after recent reports that the Pentagon may be shifting its focus to the U.S. homeland and the Western Hemisphere away from China. He said the U.S. needs to work with allies and partners, including Japan, South Korea, and Australia, to ensure that they up their own defense investments and take more responsibility for regional security. Mr. No also said that he strongly supports President Donald Trump's call for Taiwan to spend 10% of its GDP on defense. Taiwan's target defense budget for next year will cross 3%, and President William Lai had said the goal is to hit 5% by 2030. Now, a bipartisan group of American lawmakers is pushing the U.S. and its allies to enforce broader bans on the sale of chip-making equipment to China. A report by the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee found that inconsistencies among export rules in the U.S., Japan, and the Netherlands have allowed some non-American suppliers to continue selling to Chinese companies, barred by U.S. restrictions. Chinese firms last year bought $38 billion in equipment from 5 top chip-making tool suppliers. Now, that's a 66% increase from 2022, when many of the export curbs were introduced. Both Democrats and Republicans under the Trump administration have sought to restrict Beijing's ability to make microchips, citing national security. The two economic superpowers have also been vying to sell advanced technology, such as AI data centers, to other nations. Efforts to impose tighter chip controls also come amid ongoing talks between Washington and Beijing, aimed at resolving their trade differences. Well, the prospect of a ban rattling chip-making firms. The Dutch chip equipment maker ASML fell as much as 7% in Amsterdam today before paring losses, while American equipment supplier closed 5.5% overnight. The Trump administration is reportedly planning to release an aid package of up to $15 billion to help American soybean growers tide over the loss of their biggest customer. A recent data from the U.S. Agriculture Department shows that China has not booked a single shipment since the start of the season last month. It bought more than half of America's total soybean exports last year. Instead, Chinese buyers have been turning to South American suppliers from Argentina and Brazil to meet their needs. The move is taking place as Washington and Beijing remain at odds over trade. And that has left American soybean farmers one of Mr. Trump's key voter bases with overflowing warehouses and flat prices. Well, the U.S. leader promised this month that a portion of tariff revenue will be allocated to farmers. But an ongoing U.S. government shutdown is threatening to complicate rollout plans. Washington has earlier signaled that there may be a breakthrough in upcoming trade talks. Mr. Trump, as well, has promised that soybeans will be a major topic of discussion when he meets Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. Time now for a short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, a ransomware group claims responsibility for the crippling attack on Japan's beverage giant Asahi. And from code to creation, SoftBank spends $5.4 billion on ABB robotics in a bold step to merge AI with the physical world. Hello again. Good to have your company in East Asia tonight. It is now time to get you up to speed in business with Olivia Marzuki, and we are talking about gold glimmering in the headlines again. And this time, investors can't seem to get enough of it.
Yes, Oteli. Have you heard of this term before? Gold-plated FOMO. My first time also. It is fueling a dazzling rally with prices soaring to levels not seen since the 1970s. Gold has shattered yet another record high, breaking above the key 4,000 level for the first time ever. And here's a quick check on spot prices. As they stand right now, it is hovering at $4,046 per troy ounce. Bullion has now doubled in value in less than 2 years and is up more than 50% since the start of the year. Investors are flocking to the precious metal for its safe haven appeal amid growing economic uncertainty and concerns that an AI boom, which sent some equities to record highs, may have gone too far, fanning talk of an asset bubble. And for more on gold's historic run and its outlook ahead, we have Jamil Ahmad. He is chief analyst at GTC, joining us live from Dubai. Ahmad, so we are aware of the safe haven demand and central bank buying. And now we're hearing even the term gold-plated FOMO. What is really driving the gold rush this time around?
Well, Olivia, you've already mentioned two very big factors, but in fact, when you've got an asset that's now up more than 50% in 2025 alone and having its best year since 1979, the reasons are plentiful, and I'm just going to mention just a couple. The US dollar over the first half of the trading year suffered its steepest fall since 1973. So it was generational. So of course, gold is denominated in dollars. So that is a positive light on the fire as well. Secondly, if you're looking a little bit more towards the institutional side, fund managers are starting to suggest that they're actually diversifying somewhat away from traditional assets such as US treasuries and the treasuries and fixed income and so forth, and looking at alternative assets such as gold. But again, sticking to that dollar story, we've also got the US central bank under tremendous pressure from the Trump administration, which is something unconventional and we haven't seen before. And if you're looking at the ongoing US government shutdown, which is already into its second week, the direct impact that could have on the economy and the job sector, which is already struggling in the United States, if we look at the most recent monthly jobs report, that's only going to push the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, into more of a corner and more into the public spotlight from the Trump administration. And I think that's also helping matters in terms of gold optimism as well.
All right, so much of this, we presume, has got to do with the expectations as well of what the Fed does next. What is your take on the US rates and how that would set the path ahead for gold?
The Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank, have really been stuck between a rock and a hard place, Olivia, over 2025, because they were set to resume cutting interest rates. We have to remember they cut interest rates multiple times over 2024, but it was in fact the tariff uncertainty from the Trump administration and the number of times that those deadlines have changed, where you had the tariffs were unleashed firstly in April, then those deadlines got changed to June, and then it got changed to August. And this brought a lot of uncertainty to institutions and to economies, where we had the uncertainty, but we didn't really see the direct impact of the tariffs until those tariffs were actually officially confirmed. That didn't come into August. So the Fed, like others and all of us, were just waiting to see what the impact might be. Maybe the Trump administration were not serious about the tariffs, but in fact, it did turn out to be serious. So the Fed couldn't cut interest rates because they were waiting to see the data. But unfortunately, now that they left it all the way into September, there is an argument to be made that they left it too late, and the pressure cooker is high that they will need to continue cutting interest rates more aggressively over the course of 2025. And I would also look at the new news hook that Stephen Mirren, the most recently introduced member of the Federal Reserve, a Fulton member, he is an ally of the Trump administration, and he voted for a more aggressive interest rate cut last month. Should US economic data on the jobs continue to weaken, I do think we're going to start to see more dissent as well towards lowering interest rates more aggressively. That means the Fed's going to be under even more pressure.
Jamil, given how pricey it has become now, I wonder if it's still a good time to buy gold. And if investors should view the asset differently, do you see it more as a hedge, a diversification, or a long-term hold?
Well, you mentioned FOMO. I will say for gold investors, we have a little bit of YOLO as well. You only live once, because over the past 2 years, gold prices are now up double. And if we would have had this interview just 2 weeks ago, we would have said gold prices were up double over the past 5 years. So clearly, there's a number of different reasons, a number of different drivers behind gold prices. But if you look at some of the market dynamics, specifically that pressure on the US Central Bank, that hasn't been completely priced in. The likelihood of even more public attention on US interest rate policy, again, that's upcoming as a new theme. I would say that actually, yes, all technical indicators suggest that gold prices are completely overblown. We have an asset that's up now 50% this year. However, the drivers and the themes, they're not going away. If anything, that's in the air, and it's more in the air now than it was just a couple of weeks ago. So in that case, actually, there's no, I would say, limit to where gold prices could go.
All right, so we have gold, we have oil, we have USD, making headlines in the business news on the daily. Help connect the dots for us. How does movement in one typically influence the others?
So typically, that correlation we would have had in textbooks between gold and oil maybe moving in similar directions, that's no longer the case because of the market dynamics. And to be fair, that's the same case for oil and gold as well. What I would look more typically is that we still have that correlation between weakness in the US dollar, meaning positive drivers for gold. And more interestingly, over the past, I would say 1 to 2 years, we're also seeing a correlation between stronger stock markets and stronger gold sentiment. This is certainly a new market dynamic because economic textbooks would not suggest that gold and stock markets, specifically on Wall Street, can move in the same direction. But when you consider that the chorus of narrative for more weakness in the US dollar, it's strong, despite the weakest year for the dollar in a generation. Should that dollar continue to weaken, then yes, it's another positive driver for gold as well as for stock markets too.
All right, time to toss the textbook now then. What's your base case scenario over the next 6 to 12 months? Are we going to hit a ceiling price-wise for gold, or do you see more upside?
Because of the uncertainty that's taken place, specifically with the Trump administration and their potential influence as well as interference in public on US central bank policy, and then taking into account that it's a bit of a cocktail here because the Fed have left it too late to cut interest rates, even if that was not their fault because of the tariff uncertainty. That theme is just going to continue to grow and grow into a new narrative of this series. So because of this, there's no historical context for how high gold prices can continue to go. We've hit dozens of new all-time highs in 2025. I remember $3,000 being the magic number. It was only in September that $3,500 was hit for the first time. And just 6 weeks later, we're talking about $4,000. So there is no ceiling.
All right. Seems like there's no stopping the bullish momentum for bullion. Thank you, Jamil. Jamil Ahmad there, Chief Analyst at GTC in Dubai. Ransomware group Qilin has claimed responsibility for the cyber attack that crippled Japanese beer maker Asahi's operation for more than a week. Qilin operates a ransomware as a service platform that allows users to carry out attacks in exchange for a percentage of extortion proceeds. It posted 29 images to its website of what the group claims to be internal Asahi Group documents, including financial documents, contracts, and employees' information. The group claims to have stolen more than 9,300 files, or roughly 27 gigabytes of data. Asahi maintains that the matter is still under investigation, declining to comment on Qilin's claims or any details about extortion demands or negotiations. Qilin has reportedly carried out 870 ransomware attacks since 2022, including the June 2024 hack of British diagnostic services provider Synovis. For now, Asahi has restarted at least 6 of its 30 factories in Japan. And in Vietnam, a dramatic shift is underway on the roads of Hanoi. The government is fast-tracking a move away from gasoline motorbikes, and it's shaking up the country's biggest market player, Honda. The Japanese motorcycle maker has already seen sales plunge down 22% alone in August. Meanwhile, homegrown EV maker VinFast is gaining ground. Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh has ordered a ban on fossil fuel motorbikes in central Hanoi within a year and plans to expand that ban nationwide by 2028. Petrol motorbikes dominate Vietnam's market, which is one of the world's largest. Honda sold 2.6 million vehicles in the country last year, more than 80% of the total. VinFast said it delivered 71,000 electric motorbikes. A recent survey found a majority of riders in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City plan to go electric for their next purchase, citing government policies and air pollution concerns as their top reasons. Experts say that Vietnam's rapid EV push could transform one of the world's largest two-wheeler markets and force traditional manufacturers like Honda to speed up their own electric transition. The prize is the size of the market, which stands at about $4.6 billion this year and is projected to reach $6 billion by 2030. And SoftBank Group is buying the robotics division of Swedish engineering firm ABB for nearly $5.4 billion. The move signals the tech investors' renewed push into robotics after a period of retrenchment. The deal means ABB will drop plans to spin off and list its industrial automation business. The robotics business employs 7,000 people and generated sales of at least $2.3 billion last year. ABB says the unit faces falling profits and weak sales, and robotics has struggled with subdued demand in Asia, with companies delaying capital investments due to economic uncertainty. Meantime, the transaction, expected to close next year, will generate about $5.3 billion in cash, which ABB plans to use for growth, acquisitions, and shareholder returns. ABB shares rising by more than 1.6% in Zurich after the sale announcement. Meanwhile, SoftBank Group shares tanked 2% in Tokyo trade by the closing bell. OpenAI and Anthropic are reportedly considering using investor funds to settle potential multi-billion-dollar copyright lawsuits. Tech giants, including OpenAI, Microsoft, and Meta, are facing a series of high-stakes legal challenges from copyright owners who allege their materials were used without permission to train AI systems. Both U.S. AI startups are covered by standard business insurance, but experts warn that they could struggle to find protection against the massive damages they might face in the future. According to Financial Times, OpenAI has secured up to $3 million in insurance coverage, though some sources dispute that amount, saying it's far short of what's needed. The company is also said to be exploring a self-insurance model setting aside investor funds to manage future liabilities. Meanwhile, Anthropic is reportedly using its own funds to cover potential settlements after a U.S. court preliminary gave approval to $1.5 billion settlement in a copyright class action last month. That's all I have in business for now, Oteli.
Thanks so very much for that business report, Olivia. Okay, well, time now to go for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, North Korea gathers its allies in Pyongyang ahead of celebrations marking its ruling party's founding anniversary. Plus, North Korean hackers reportedly stealing a record $2 billion in crypto this year. You're watching East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we've been following. China's top diplomat in Italy, Wang Yi, aiming to recalibrate Beijing's ties with the EU and protect trade links as tensions rise over tariffs and Chinese investment scrutiny. South Korea warns planned tariff hikes on steel, where the European Union could hit its exports hard, as Seoul's top trade envoy heads to Brussels hoping to secure a better deal. And a Pentagon official says the U.S.-South Korea alliance should focus on deterring North Korea, but adds its advanced defenses also boost deterrence against China, calling Beijing Washington's most serious military threat. A North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, leveraging on the founding anniversary of his ruling party to reach out to allies. State media KCNA reports that Mr. Kim held talks with the Laotian president in Pyongyang yesterday, and that the two leaders discussed strengthening mutual cooperation between their countries. Now, Mr. Kim welcomed the Laotian president in a ceremony that included top officials, a cheering crowd, and a 21-gun salute. During their talks, the Laotian leader says his country has always been a close friend with North Korea, and that he will continue to develop their friendship. The visit has been described as a rare trip by a foreign head of state to North Korea, which is under heavy international sanctions for its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Pyongyang is reportedly preparing a large-scale military parade this Friday to mark the founding anniversary of its ruling party. Foreign leaders expected at the celebrations include Chinese Premier Li Qiang, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, and Vietnam's Communist Party chief To Lam. For more insights, let's bring in Rachel Minyoung Lee, a senior fellow at Stimson Center's career program. Well, thanks so very much, Rachel, for joining us this evening. Now, first up, you have an interesting take on North Korea-China relations, and you are not entirely convinced that they've grown close after, that show at the latest Xi and Kim summit. Help our viewers understand why.
Thank you for that, and thank you for having me. I think the general headlines, international headlines you'll see in the wake of Kim Jong-un's latest summit with Xi Jinping in Beijing in early September on the sidelines of China's Victory Day, were that the two leaders have gotten the relationship back on track after 2 years of frayed relations, that the two countries are growing close. I have a bit of a different take, as you noted, on that, because despite some of the positive references to the relationship, for example, Kim Jong-un said, according to North Korea's official report on the Kim-Xi summit, that despite what happens in international relations, how the international situation may change, the two countries' feelings for each other cannot change. So that's an example of a positive reference to the bilateral relationship. However, compared to past North Korean reports on Kim-Xi summits, and there were 5 summits before the latest one, the references weren't that positive, and there was no sign of alignment. And I think that's the most important thing. In the past readouts from North Korea of Kim-Xi summits, you would see words like agreement, consensus, shared understanding. We didn't see any kind of that language, at least not from the North Korean official readout. And I think more importantly is what we saw in the wake of the Kim-Xi summit in early September. There are a couple of indicators I use to say this. Kim Jong-un sent two letters to Xi Jinping after coming back from his trip to Beijing. Again, some positive references to the bilateral relationship, but mostly the language was lifted from the North Korean official report on the summit. But there was no warmth in those letters, unlike in the past that we have seen in Kim Jong-un's letters to Xi Jinping. And also, you saw North Korea's Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee visiting Beijing later in the month as a follow-up, I would imagine, to the Kim-Xi summit and also to coordinate a Chinese delegation's visit to North Korea to celebrate the North Korean Party founding anniversary. Importantly, we did not see Choi Sun-hee meeting with Xi Jinping. And that's notable for two reasons. The last time before Choi Sun-hee visited, that a North Korean foreign minister visited China, and that was in December 2018, we saw the North Korean foreign minister at the time, Minyoung meeting with Xi Jinping. And Choi Sun-hee did not get that visit this time.
Okay,
did
so
not get that
Rachel, I have to
during
jump
her,
in there,
visit.
and I want to talk about Choi Sun-hee, as you've mentioned, right? I mean, she's been to Beijing twice in less than a month, and the last trip right in the heels of Wang Yi's invitation. So does this suggest to you that there's something urgent they need to attend to? I mean, what's going on behind those closed-door meetings?
Well, I think it was kind of natural in the sense that she was following up on the Kim-Xi summit. The fact that the visit came only 2 or 3 weeks after Kim visited, that tells you that they wanted to quickly follow up on the summit, which you could take as a good sign. But also, again, I think a part of the reason why she was there later in the month was to coordinate an upcoming visit by a high-level delegation from China to North Korea to celebrate the party founding anniversary.
So beyond those, major powers, Kim has also been reaching out to smaller partners. So when you look at this sort of diplomatic sequencing there, outreach to Russia and then China, and also the smaller states, including Laos and Belarus, what is Kim's strategy here, you think, with this new wave of, mini diplomacy?
That's a very good question. I think what we're seeing is North Korea being faithful to its foreign policy. Kim Jong-un for years has been telling his foreign policy officials to step up North Korea's relations with friendly countries and like-minded countries. And I think that's exactly what Kim Jong-un is doing right now. We saw him making his debut on a multilateral diplomatic stage when he attended China's Victory Day celebrations in early September. And that's beside the bilateral relationships that he has with Vladimir Putin. And now he's gotten his relationship with Xi Jinping back on track somewhat. So I think we are seeing an extension of his activities in early Beijing, meeting with the different leaders from the socialist bloc. The leaders from Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and you will see many of them back in Pyongyang later this week.
So, Rachel, let's look ahead to North Korea's own domestic timeline. You've said that Kim, he could emerge more confident ahead of North Korea's next party congress. So what do you think we should be looking out for in the coming months to tell whether, this whole diplomatic blitz or charm offensive is actually working?
So I think we're already seeing a lot of propaganda internally in North Korea's state-run media about the importance of the party founding anniversary. Of course, it is the 80th anniversary, so it's considered a major year by North Korean standards. So we'll see a lot of propaganda, of course, during and after Kim meets with the different foreign leaders this week who are in Pyongyang for the celebrations. We will see a lot of propaganda again on that. When all of these visits are over, when the celebrations are over, I think what we will see between then and the end of the year is maybe a labor mobilization campaign, which North Korea tends to carry out in the lead up to a major party meeting. And we are expecting one in probably January 2026, and that would be the 9th Party Congress. So the reason for the mobilization campaign is really to to finish all of the economic tasks that were given 5 years ago at the 8th Party Congress. So they're really going to have to have all hands on deck to finish as many of those tasks as possible before the 9th Party Congress is convened early next year.
Hey, thanks so very much for speaking with us. I know it's really early in Washington now, but really appreciate your time and thoughts. Rachel Minyoung Lee, Senior Fellow at Stimson Center's Korea Program. North Korean hackers may have already stolen more than $2 billion this year. That's a record sum that the UN estimates to be about 13% of the country's GDP, beating the previous high set in 2022. Now, investigators at research firm Elliptic says that North Korean hackers are increasingly setting their sights on crypto-wealthy individuals, as they often lack security measures that businesses usually employ. Well, that's a shift in focus from their previous targets, cryptocurrency companies, for large thefts of digital tokens. Well, the sum stolen by North Korean hackers may be higher than estimated, as individuals are less likely to report on the cyber thefts. Western security agencies say stolen funds are used to finance North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile development programs. Another break's up next, but coming up in East Asia tonight, the UK's top prosecutor blames the British government for the collapse of the trial of 2 men accused of spying for China. Plus, Australia and Singapore upgrade strategic ties, deepening cooperation in defence, trade and the climate. The UK's most senior prosecutor has blamed the British government for the collapse of a case against 2 men accused of spying for China. Well, the country's chief prosecutor says the case fell through because the government refused to label Beijing a national security threat. Now, the case was dropped early in September in what is seen as a shock move, just weeks before the 2 men were due to go on trial. Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry were charged in April 2024 with passing politically sensitive information to a Chinese intelligence agent. At the time of the alleged offences, Mr. Cash was a parliamentary researcher specialising in China, while Mr. Berry was based in China. The 2 men have denied all accusations, while the Chinese embassy called the allegations fabricated, dismissing them as, quote, malicious slander. The pair were charged under the UK's Official Secrets Act, which states that it is a crime to communicate any documents which might be useful to a, quote, enemy. Now, Ollie Barrett is covering the story for CNA from London. And so, Ollie, walk us through, all the details of how this case actually collapsed in the end. Once again, Ollie, just making sure you can hear us. If you could just walk us through the details of how this case collapsed. I'm afraid there is a technical glitch there. But we were trying to speak to Ollie Barrett for CNA from London. Perhaps we can try to get him back a little later on the bulletin. In the meantime, we turn our attention now to the last group of hikers stranded by a blizzard near Mount Everest. They have been guided to safety in Tibet. Chinese officials say around 200 people were brought out yesterday, bringing the total number of those rescued to 580. And at least 1 person died. Some were treated for hypothermia. The tourists became stranded over the weekend at an altitude of more than 4,900 meters after heavy snowfall blocked their route up Everest's eastern slopes. Hundreds of local villagers and rescue teams were mobilized for the rescue effort. One expert believes those trapped lacked proper training.
They're all newcomers, and then basically they don't have the exact experience of what it's like to be, what's the weather, if the weather condition is harsh, and how you're going to prepare, those kind of, they don't have that kind of experience.
Well, some experienced climbers and guides, however, said the conditions they faced were unusual and unlike anything they had encountered before. October usually provides clear skies and friendly temperatures, making it one of the favored months to hike in the Mount Everest area. Visitors to Tibet's remote Karma Valley, which leads to the eastern face of Everest, were on the higher side this week, as many took advantage of China's 8-day national holiday. Singapore will deepen cooperation with Australia in areas such as defence, supply chains and the green economy. It comes under an expanded, comprehensive strategic partnership, the first such deal for Singapore, coming a decade after the initial agreement was inked. Leaders on both sides say this reflects the common view on the importance of multilateralism and free and fair trade. CNA's Claudia Lim has more from Canberra.
The Singapore national anthem, ringing in the heart of Australia's capital, Canberra, welcoming Prime Minister Lawrence Wong on his official visit. The visit marks 60 years of diplomatic relations, and this year, a signal that it's full steam ahead. After a 4IN delegation meeting between the leaders, it was down to business. Under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership 2.0, 80 initiatives have been outlined, charting what PM Wong calls an ambitious agenda across many domains.
Both Australia and Singapore recognize that our future security and prosperity lies in Asia. And that means we will have to work together to shape the architecture for cooperation in our region. Singapore will continue to support Australia's efforts to deepen its engagement with Southeast Asia.
On the defence front, the upgraded partnership could see Australia play a larger role in the region. For instance, giving the Australians greater access to Singapore's military facilities. Both sides are also looking to ensure critical goods like food and medical supplies can keep moving seamlessly during times of crisis. That's as it draws lessons from the disruptions seen during COVID-19. It comes at a time when both prime ministers say the world is becoming increasingly uncertain and unsettled.
There's more disruption than there's been in the past. One of the things that makes this relationship so solid is that we know where we're coming from and we know where we're going together. We have a common worldview about the importance of multilateralism, about the importance of free and fair trade.
We had the world's first digital and green economy agreements, and that indeed served as pathfinders. When we work together like that, we are not only looking at bilateral initiatives that benefit each one of us, but also looking with a view to preserve important multilateral frameworks or strengthen multilateral frameworks that will enable us to keep the rules-based global system going.
Mr. Wong says all this is made possible by the deep reservoir of trust between both countries, and that this foundation can chart new frontiers and deliver lasting benefits for all. Claudia Lim, CNA, Canberra.
The winners of this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry have been announced.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2025 Nobel Prize in Chemistry to Susumu Kitagawa, Kyoto University, Japan, Richard Robson, University of Melbourne, Australia, and Omar Yagi, University of California at Berkeley, USA, for the development of metal organic...
Right, you've heard there, the three have been given the prestigious award for the development of metal organic frameworks. It's a new type of molecular architecture which allows molecules to flow in and out. It can be utilized to harvest water from desert air, extract pollutants from water, capture carbon dioxide and store toxic gases. Well, the award-giving body says the laureates have provided chemists with new opportunities for solving challenges the world faces today. Well, we managed to get Ollie Barrick back, and he's covering for CNA about the collapse of a case in the UK involving two men accused of spying for China. So once again, Ollie, let's try this out again. Talk us through the details of how this case actually collapsed.
Second time lucky, Ateli. Yes, it was last month that the case collapsed, with prosecutors saying at the time they didn't have the evidence they required to proceed with it. The case against Christopher Cash, who was a parliamentary researcher here at Westminster at the time of the allegations, and Christopher Berry, a teacher who at the time of the allegations was living in China, and they had been accused of passing politically sensitive information to a Chinese agent, and that was the formation of the allegations, charged in 2024, and it had been several weeks leading up to a trial this year before we saw that collapse. Now, what is also new in the last 24 hours or so is that the Director of Prosecutions here in the UK says that the reason for the collapse of the trial was that the prosecuting team had been trying to obtain a statement or evidence from the UK government which would have made clear the claim that information had been passed to a country which was considered a threat to national security or an enemy. Now, the collapse of the case has led to allegations from critics of Keir Starmer and the UK government that they have somehow caused this collapse themselves by not providing information asked of them by prosecutors. That is something that is being denied by the UK government. Keir Starmer says that this relates to the position of the last government, because the Conservatives were in power at the time of these allegations, and when the Conservatives were in power, they did not describe China as an enemy or a threat to national security. They described China as an epoch-defining challenge, and Labour hasn't fundamentally changed that position since it got into power. It is, though, reviewing its policy towards China. So the UK government pushing back very strongly against the idea that it was it that caused the collapse of this highly sensitive case.
So more broadly, this development, how do you think it's going to affect Britain's relations with China?
Well, it's very interesting, Ateli, because perhaps the real threat to relations with China was from the case going ahead. And that is why some of those critics of the government have been making the claim that that is why the government didn't want to provide all the information that was being required of it that led to the case's collapse. That, again, is something that is being denied by the UK government, with Downing Street saying the suggestion government withheld evidence, withdrew witnesses or restricted the ability of a witness to draw on particular evidence are all untrue. This may actually, therefore, ease Chinese relations with the UK in the coming weeks and months ahead, at a time when the UK is trying to boost ties with Beijing. It does say it recognises that there are ways in which it will have to challenge China, and that there are ways in which the relationship will be difficult. But Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, is expected to head to China in the not too distant future to try and reach some kind of boosted trading agreement, and the absence of this case may well help him when it comes to China relations in that regard. But as I say, the government insists that is not what led to it not providing the evidence that prosecutors say they needed in this particularly sensitive case.
Good to know. Thanks so very much for that report. Ollie Barrett for CNA from London. And on that note, we wrap up East Asia tonight for Wednesday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.